CatSynth TV.
Hey everybody, CatSynth TV, and this is part 2 of our detailed look at the Korg modwave synthesizer. In this video we will explore the motion sequencer, more of the filters, the effects section, and a few other features. If you haven't yet seen part 1, we do recommend watching that first. There is a link right up at the top, or in the description below. And as always, please do subscribe to this channel for more synthesizer content coming out regularly. The modwave's motion sequencer builds on the Wave Sequencer 2.0 found in Korg's wave state synthesizer. The sequencer has 7 lanes for timing, pitch, shapes, and 4 user-definable parameters. Each lane has its own loop points and step behavior, and each step of each lane has its own probability. Because the sequencer runs independently per voice, this can mean quite a variety of sequencer behavior at once. In this tutorial, we'll start simply and gradually build up some more complex behavior. First, let's go to the initial preset and select a wavetable. There we go. To bring up the sequencer, press Shift and 5. You can see the different lanes in the display: master, timing, pitch, shape, and assignable A, B, C, and D. Each lane has up to 64 steps. We see the first 16 steps right now. Let's try recording a pattern into the pitch lane. Press record. The recordable lanes flash. Press pitch. Now because the pitches are relative, we need to first set a reference note. I'll pick the C over here. Press enter. We now see the buttons turn blue, representing each of the first 16 steps of the sequencer. We can play a key to record a step and advance to the next. Press record to stop recording. We can now press enable to start the sequencer whenever we play a key. You can see it advance through the 16 steps. Note that the last few are just the reference notes since we recorded only 9 steps. We can press Shift and pitch to configure the pitch lane. Let's set the loop end to A10. Actually make that A9. Now the sequencer runs independently per voice, so when I play several keys, they run out of sync from one another by default. We can bring up the sequencer configuration and set sync notes on. Now all the keys will play together, with later keys starting mid-sequence. We can of course edit the sequence, select a step, and go to the second page of parameters. We can choose from several actions, such as cut step. There, the step is now cut and our pitch lane got slightly shorter. As mentioned earlier, each step of each lane can be assigned a probability. This allows a step to randomly fire or be skipped, depending on the probability value. Let's set a probability for step 2. And step 5. You can hear that the steps sometimes fire and sometimes don't, adding variety to the sequence. Now one cool trick we can do is use one of the mod knobs to control probability. Let's pick a few steps. Set the probability to 0 and then assign knob 1 to control it. When assigning a mod, we can hit Enter to use the most recent parameter. Now we can hear the sequence change as we turn the knob between 0 and 100% probability for the selected steps. Okay, let's bring up the sequencer view. We can see the pitch lane and its loop points. Let's now go to the timing lane. This allows us to set up individual durations for each step. By default, they are all 16th notes. Let's set step 1 to an 8th note. It's hard to see, but there are note symbols on the screen. Let's leave 2 and 3 as 16th notes, set a dotted 8th, and keep choosing different durations. Okay, let's play it back. Note that because we have 16 steps on the timing lane, the pitches will fall on different timing steps as we advance. Combined with probability, this leads to more pitch and rhythmic variety. We can also add probabilities to the timing steps and set up a controller knob for them just as we did for the pitch lane. Set probability to 0, then assign a modulation with knob 2. Repeat the process. It's tedious, so we'll just fast forward. Now we have an ever-changing pitch and rhythm pattern. We can also use the sequencer with any voice parameter using one of the assignable lanes. Let's press record and select lane A. We now press a key and choose a parameter. I'm going to record oscillator 1 position. Let's play it back. You can hear how the position changes as we move through the sequence. Now let's press Shift and select A's parameter page. Right now we have transition set to linear, which means the wave position change is linear between step values. We can turn the transition off to jump from one position to the next. Or we can set it to another curve, like logarithmic. This is a good time to introduce the shape lane. We can use it to continuously modify the values of another lane, like lane A. Shift and select shape. Each step has a shape or function assigned to it. Let's go through the steps and assign different shapes to each. And there's some interesting ones here. Okay, now let's play what we have. Very complex, maybe even a little too much. We can soften things a bit with the filter controlled by its own LFO. Set the LFO to be tempo controlled so that it stays in sync with the sequencer. We'll set it to a whole note length. Now let's go back to the pitch lane and look at the different modes. By default, we are advancing forward through the steps. We can also go backwards or back and forth. There's also a random step mode. As you can see, there is quite a lot of freedom with the sequencer. Let's restart things and set up a sequence that is focused entirely on timbral evolution. First, let's set up a new voice with 2 wavetables on oscillator 1 and 1 wavetable on oscillator 2. We'll pick a few of my favorite wavetables. Now dial in some of the voice parameters we demoed back in part 1. Okay, now we're ready to bring in the sequencer. Press record and select A to record oscillator 1 position. Okay, so I'm not too excited about that recording. Fortunately, we can easily clear a lane by hitting record again and then pressing enter when prompted. Never mind what it is I'm doing with my left hand there, just follow the right hand. Okay, we're ready to re-record. There, that is much better. Now let's record oscillator 2 position into lane B. Record, select B, and go. You can hear the different wavetables changing at different rates for a very rich evolving sound. Now once again, we can change the probability of the steps. Let's do that for step 1 on lane A, and change a few more step probabilities. The result is even more timbral variety. Let's change out the B wavetable on oscillator 1. Find a bell tone of sorts. Nice. And it's interesting how the complex sequencer behavior obscures the original wavetable character. Let's add even more dynamism and record oscillator 1 morph onto sequencer lane C. Probably should have chosen a morph type beforehand, but I'll go ahead and switch to narrow stretch now. We can modify the probabilities of some of the lane C steps. Let's add some FM morph on oscillator 2. And there. I really like this sound, so let's save it. Again, naming things is quite tedious on the modwave. This'll do for now. And shift right to save. Now I feel like I really didn't do justice to the filter section in part 1, so now we're going to look at it in more detail. Let's start again with a single wavetable on oscillator 1, that chaotique one that I seem to really like. And add a little noise from the sub-noise oscillator. Use Shift and the knob to change the noise type. Okay, let's dial the noise back a little bit. We're going to start with the PolySix mode, which recreates the low-pass filter from the Korg PolySix. Definitely a classic analog synth vibe there. We can bring up the envelope control, which uses the dedicated filter envelope. Very nice. Next, we'll look at the MS-20 low-pass filter. Let's crank up that infamous MS-20 resonance. Let's bring in the filter LFO. Increase the frequency a bit. Press Shift and the frequency knob to change the LFO waveform. Let's try this random pulse thing. Okay, let's turn down the modulations and look at the multi-filter. This is a filter that allows one to morph continuously between two different customizable states. It has cutoff and resonance like the other filters. But it also has an additional crossfade parameter that can be reached via Shift plus the envelope knob. There are several different presets for the filter states. Let's try this one that mixes high pass with low pass and band pass. Multi-mode filters take a bit of practice, and having to use Shift to control it is a bit of a pain. Fortunately, we can just assign one of the mod knobs to control the crossfade instead. This is fun, but honestly my favorite filters are still the PolySix and MS-20. It's not an accident that these filters have the reputation that they do. Now let's turn our attention to the effects section. Primarily there are the layer effects, which act on individual layers of the performance. There are 3 separate slots for different categories of effects: pre, modulation, and delay. There is also a master effects section with a global reverb and EQ setting. The first slot, pre-effects, is for compressors, EQs, and the like. Right now, we have a modern compressor loaded. We can enable it by double-clicking the button. Let's try a different algorithm, parametric EQ. There are controls for wet-dry, as well as 3 parameters. Parameter 1 has a dedicated knob, while 2 and 3 require shift. There are also wackier effects in the pre section, like ring modulator. It's fun to change the parameters on this one in real time, so we can assign them to mod knobs instead of having to use the parameter pages. Okay, let's turn that off and look at the modulation effects. This is your flangers, phasers, choruses, etc. Right now we have a chorus. Let's increase the wet level. Let's bring up this orange phase algorithm. Yeah, that's a lot of fun, but we should move on and look at the delay section. There are a large variety of delay effects here, including tape echo. Like pre and modulation, a delay effect has 3 parameters. The tape echo seems like a good one to modulate using the chaos physics. Let's set parameter 1 to chaos X, parameter 2, feedback, to the distance from the center of the chaos pad, and parameter 3, timbre, to chaos X as well. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't use chaos Y here, but it is what it is. Let's just roll with it. Finally, let's turn off delay and look at the global reverb. Again, there are several different algorithms available. Right now we have Qverb. You can set the send amounts from layers A and B of the performance separately. Let's try a different reverb algorithm, Symphonic Hall. And now let's bring the ring modulator back in just because. And the tape echo. We hope that you've enjoyed this detailed look at the Korg modwave and have some ideas on how to use it in your own music. To find out more, please visit Korg's website. And if you have any questions about anything we covered or didn't cover, please ask in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to CatSynth TV.